Imagine standing in a courtroom, two young black twins, their eyes filled with courage, rise to defend their mother against lies that could destroy her life. But as they speak, something happens that no one in the room could have expected. The white judge sitting on the bench suddenly freezes, his gavel trembling in his hand. Why? Because in that very moment, he realizes he is not just the judge, he is the father who abandoned them years ago. What happens next will leave you breathless. Before we dive into this emotional story, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel Gentle Words, because stories like these remind us that truth, no matter how long hidden, will always come to light. The courtroom was heavy with silence, the kind of silence that presses down on people's shoulders and makes even breathing feel like a crime. Every seat in the gallery was filled, strangers and neighbors whispering about the case, about the black woman who stood accused, and the twins who sat by her side. They were only 17, yet their eyes carried the weight of 1,000 storms. Their mother, Naomi, sat with her head held high, though the chains of injustice clinked at her wrists. She was a housekeeper by trade, a woman who had scrubbed floors and polished windows so her children could eat, sleep, and dream. And now she stood here, accused of theft she never committed, targeted by the wealthy family she had once served with loyalty. At the bench, Judge Harrison adjusted his glasses and looked over the papers before him. His face was sharp, his hair graying at the temples, and his robe draped heavily around his frame. To everyone in the room, he was just another powerful white judge, a man with authority, with the power to decide a family's fate in minutes. But what no one knew, not even the man himself fully realized until that day, was that the blood that ran in those twins' veins was also his. The prosecutor stood, his voice smooth but sharp as a blade. Your Honor, this woman, Naomi, has been caught stealing valuable jewelry from her employer. The evidence points directly to her, and we intend to prove that she not only betrayed her position but corrupted her children into helping her hide the crime. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Naomi flinched, but her children, Elijah and Eliana, sat taller. They weren't just children, they were protectors, ready to fight. Objection. Naomi's lawyer shouted. There is no proof that these children have been involved in anything illegal. And as for Naomi, she has served that household for nearly 2 decades with nothing but loyalty. If anything, she deserves a medal, not chains. The judge raised a hand, silencing the room. We will hear all testimonies, he said calmly, though his eyes lingered strangely on the twins. Something about them stirred something deep in his chest, something buried under years of ambition, silence, and choices he'd long forgotten. When the prosecution rested, the defense attorney whispered to Elijah and Eliana, "This is your chance. Tell the truth. Tell them who your mother is." The twins looked at each other. They had rehearsed this moment, but standing there now, under the cold lights and the watchful eyes of strangers, their legs trembled. Elijah was the first to rise. His voice shook, but not with fear, with conviction. "My name is Elijah," he began, looking straight at the judge. "And this woman you see here, our mother, she is the most honest, hard-working person alive. She would rather starve than steal. She raised us alone, with no help from anyone, not even the man who abandoned her when she needed him most." Naomi's eyes widened, her heart pounding. Eliana stood beside her brother, her hand slipping into his. "Your Honor," she said softly. Her voice like a blade wrapped in velvet, "We know what they say about our mother. But we also know the truth. She carried us through nights of hunger, through winters without heat, through days when she scrubbed the same floor on her knees while people walked past her like she was invisible. She never once complained. She never once broke the law. The only crime here is that she was left to do it all alone." A murmur spread through the courtroom, the gallery leaning closer. Naomi shook her head, tears threatening to spill. "Children," she whispered, but they pressed on. Elijah's eyes fixed on the judge, unblinking, searching. "And the man who left us, he is here. In this room. He is watching. Maybe he doesn't remember, maybe he doesn't want to, but we remember every night our mother cried. We remember the face she described, the promises he made, and the silence that followed. And now, here we are, standing in front of the very man who abandoned us." The judge's gavel slipped in his grip, striking the desk with a hollow sound. His face drained of color. Gasps filled the courtroom again as whispers erupted like wildfire. "What are they saying? Is it true?" Naomi shook her head, her chest tightening. "Stop. Stop this now," She pleaded, but the twins stood firm. Eliana pointed, her voice trembling but fierce. Judge Harrison, you are our father. And you left us before we could even speak your name. The room exploded with noise. The prosecutor slammed his hands on the desk. Objection. Outrageous accusation, he bellowed. The gavel struck again, but the judge's hand shook violently. His mind flashed back. 20 years ago, a young woman with eyes full of light, promises whispered in the dark, the choice to walk away because ambition burned brighter than love. Naomi. He remembered everything. The silence that followed was deafening. The twins' words hung heavy in the air, undeniable, unstoppable. Naomi covered her face with her hands, the tears falling freely now. She had sworn she'd never tell them, never let them bear the weight of that truth. And yet here it was, exposed in the most public, painful way possible. The judge's voice cracked when he finally spoke. Is this true, Naomi? His eyes, once cold and authoritative, now pleaded for something, denial, forgiveness, anything. Naomi slowly rose to her feet, the chains at her wrists clinking softly. Her face was wet with tears, but her voice was steady. Yes, she whispered. Yes, you are their father. And you left us. You left me. The gallery gasped again. Some people covered their mouths, others shook their heads in disbelief. For the first time in his career, Judge Harrison felt powerless. His robe no longer felt like authority, it felt like chains heavier than Naomi's. His children stood before him, strong and broken, demanding answers he didn't have the courage to give. Elijah stepped forward, his voice softer now. We don't need your wealth. We don't need your power. We just want the world to know the truth. That our mother is innocent. That she raised us alone. And that the man sitting there in judgment has no right to judge anyone. The words cut deeper than any gavel, deeper than any verdict. And in that moment, everyone in the courtroom knew, the case was no longer about stolen jewelry. It was about stolen years, stolen love, stolen family. Naomi's lawyer placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Your Honor, in light of this revelation, it is clear this case cannot continue without bias. But before you recuse yourself, I ask you, look at this woman. Look at what she endured. And ask yourself if you can really believe she is guilty of what they accuse her of. The judge's lips trembled. His eyes flickered from Naomi to the twins, and for the first time, he saw not just faces, but reflections. His son, his daughter, his family. The courtroom waited, breaths held, as Judge Harrison's gavel fell one last time. Case dismissed, he whispered, his voice breaking. Naomi, you are free. Naomi collapsed into her children's arms, sobbing as Elijah and Eliana held her tightly. The gallery erupted, some in outrage, some in tears, some in stunned silence. But for the twins, none of it mattered. They had defended their mother. They had told the truth. And they had forced the man who had abandoned them to face what he had done. And for Judge Harrison, it was the day his past returned, not as whispers, but as living proof of a love he had forsaken, and the family he never claimed. The gavel's echo still lingered in the courtroom, yet the world outside had already begun to shift. Naomi stood in the center of the storm, her wrists finally free from the cold embrace of shackles, her children clinging to her sides like roots to a tree that had weathered too many winters. The gallery slowly emptied, but whispers trailed behind like smoke. Some whispered in shock, the judge. Their father. Others hissed in judgment, how could a woman like her have ever been with a man like him? Yet beneath it all, there were murmurs of admiration for the twins, two young souls who had defied power with nothing but truth. Naomi lowered her gaze, ashamed, even in freedom. She never wanted her children to carry this revelation. It was her burden, one she had held in silence for nearly 2 decades. Yet now, it was painted across the faces of strangers, inked into headlines she could already imagine. As they stepped into the corridor, Elijah placed a hand on her shoulder. Mama, don't cry. We did it. You're free. But Naomi only shook her head, her lips trembling. At what cost? Eliana gripped her hand tightly. At the cost of truth. And the truth is never too high a price. The elevator doors slid open, but before they could step inside, a voice called from behind. Wait. It was Judge Harrison. No, not Judge, not in that moment. Just a man stripped of titles, stripped of robes, stripped of everything except the crushing weight of regret. He stood bare-faced, his robe draped over his arm, his eyes red as if he had aged 10 years in a single hour. Naomi stiffened, her children pressing closer to her sides like shields. "What do you want?" she asked coldly, her voice a dagger carved from years of pain. Harrison swallowed hard, his throat dry. "Just a word. With you. With them." Elijah stepped forward, blocking his mother slightly. "Why now? Why after all these years?" The judge's hands trembled. He had delivered verdicts in murder trials, sentenced men twice his size to lifetimes behind bars, faced the wrath of politicians and criminals alike. Yet in the presence of these two children, his children, he shook like a man on trial. "I was young," he began, his voice breaking. "Ambitious. I thought love was something I could set aside for later. I was wrong. Naomi, I should have stayed. I should have been there. Not a day has passed that I haven't thought about you. About them. But, don't," Naomi cut him off, her voice like iron. "Don't pretend you thought about us. If you had, you would have come. You would have written. You would have done something. But you didn't. You left. And I carried the weight alone." The twins exchanged glances, torn between anger and a strange ache that gnawed at them. Part of them wanted to hate him forever. Part of them, though they hated to admit it, longed for answers. Eliana's voice trembled when she spoke. "Why didn't you want us?" The question stabbed deeper than any accusation. Harrison's knees nearly buckled. He knelt before them, his hands shaking as though reaching towards something fragile he didn't deserve to touch. "It wasn't that I didn't want you. It was that I didn't believe I deserved you. I thought, if I focused on my career, if I became powerful enough, maybe one day I could come back with something to offer. But by the time I realized power meant nothing without family, it was too late." Naomi's chest tightened. For years, she had played the strong one, the shield, the wall. But hearing his words tore open wounds she thought had scarred. "Do you know," she whispered, "how many nights I prayed for you to knock on that door? Do you know how many times I had to lie to them, tell them their father was gone, because I couldn't bear to tell them the truth?" Harrison's eyes brimmed with tears. "I am sorry." More than words could ever say. But Elijah, his jaw clenched, shook his head. "Sorry doesn't feed a hungry family. Sorry doesn't hold a crying child at night. Sorry doesn't make up for 17 years of absence." His voice cracked, but his resolve did not. "You can't just walk back in here and fix this with words." The silence that followed was thick, painful, stretching between them like a canyon. Finally, Eliana stepped closer. Her eyes were softer, though just as wounded. "Maybe words can't fix it. But truth can start something. You are our father. We can't change that. But whether you'll ever be our dad, that depends on what you do now." Her words struck Harrison like a hammer. For the first time, someone had given him a bridge, however thin, across the chasm of his mistakes. Naomi turned away, her body trembling. She couldn't forgive, not yet, maybe not ever. But the sight of her children standing so tall, so strong, filled her with pride. They weren't broken. They weren't victims. They were warriors forged by her love and by absence alike. The elevator chimed, breaking the moment. Naomi stepped inside, the twins following. Harrison remained in the hall, his hands shaking, his tears finally falling freely. As the doors began to close, Elijah's voice called out, "If you really mean what you say, prove it. Not with money. Not with promises. Prove it by being there." The doors shut, leaving Harrison alone with his regrets.